friends, how's it going today? It's Kat. I cannot wait to film this video. I'm like getting emotional already talking about it. This book took me completely 100% by surprise, like knocked me off my feet. It took me 2 days since I finished it to be able to like process and make my notes and go back through and read my highlights. I always do that when I'm preparing for a book. I go through, for a video, I go through my highlights, I write down notes, make sure that there's things I remember to talk about. That's kind of the nerd in me. And I couldn't do that right away with this book because I was just still so immersed. And I know because it took me a couple days to sit down and to formulate my thoughts and do that, I can honestly say it's in my top 3 books that I've ever read. That's a really big deal to me because I read a lot. I love reading love stories. I read a lot of love stories. I can't help but love stories, and it's just me. I am just one of those readers that is never gonna get sick of reading in the romance genre at all. And I know we all laugh about like book boyfriends and everything, and I always refer to Marcus Anderson from Victoria L. James' Naxic series, I have trouble saying that word, as my book husband. That when I read him, I had book boyfriends before, but when I read him, there was something about Marcus that just organically, I just fell in love with him in a completely different way. And it's been that way for several years. I've talked about before about how I can identify really easily with female characters, and I mean, obviously I'm a girl, I'm a woman, and so it's not hard for me to find things in female characters that I connect with. And they might be different personalities than me, but I can always find something that I connect with. This book, Billie she just said all these things that were like coming from my mouth. Everything she said while she was saying it, I was saying it in my head or reacting the same way, or she just spoke to me on such a deep level. And Sawyer, oh my God, I'm gonna cry. Sawyer was amazing. I'm so embarrassed that I'm crying. That's how much Sawyer affected me. And he is now, I'm not going to say I'm cheating on Marcus with Sawyer. I'm going to swing with both of them. They are up on the pedestal of, they are my book husbands. Totally, completely unexpected. And I also want to remind you that it is a duet, 2 books. I'm going to talk about both books in this video, so keep that in mind. And also, I really do try not to give spoilers about the book, but and I'm going to try and hold true to that, but just keep in mind that because it's both books, you're inevitably going to get a spoiler about the second book because I'm talking about both of them. Does that make sense? I hope that made sense to you. I've only read one other series by her, and I didn't actually even remember that it was her that wrote that series when I signed up for this book. I knew her name as an author, but I didn't put those 2 together because I read the other series, Ready for Flynn, years ago. I mean, I don't know, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I'd have to go back and look. Ugh, my curly hair is kind of annoying me. I can feel it. Anyway, and I really liked it. When I realized that it was the same author, I went right back to Ready for Flynn, and that was a little bit later. That was after I'd started reading this duet. And then I remembered there were so many really great emotional parts to Ready for Flynn that stuck out in my mind still, having read it that long ago. It was one of those books that carried with me. And when I think about certain things in a book, Ready for Flynn has a situation that just gutted me, and I felt so terrible. Oh my gosh, it was so emotional. And if you've read that book, you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Valerie's family. And, you know, it has stayed with me. I've never read another book where there was something like that in it. So I've always remembered that. And so when I realized that it was the same, Kale was the same author for, you know, what am I trying to say? That she wrote that series and this series, obviously other books as well. I thought, oh my gosh, I am in for quite a ride here. The way she wrote this duet, like I said, with Billie. Billie is the female character, the lead character. She's almost 40 years old. She has a young child. She's married, but the book starts with, oh, is my mascara running because I was tearing up? The book starts with her figuring out that her life is falling apart, that her husband is leaving the marriage. And, you know, I think for me, I often read books about, you know, girls that are in their young 20s, or, you know, even up to 30 years old, or if it's, you know, a young adult novel, it's, you know, they're in their, you know, late teens into early 20s in the book, and that's all fine and dandy. I mean, a love story is a love story to me. I'm going to give everyone a fair shake. And I remember, I mean, I'm not that old, you know, I can remember back to that time in my life, so it's easy for me to connect to those stories as well. However, this story, and I've read age gaps before, but the women have always been of a younger age. So Billie, to me, you know, I'm not that much older than Billie, and I am married. I have children. I have friends that have and family members that have experienced what she's going through at her point when this book starts. So I understood her on a very deep level right from the beginning. She is in a very fragile spot in her life, and she's like, okay, you know, like, bye. I mean, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But yet, she's so low, and she realizes that in her marriage, she was complacent, and she loved her husband, she loved her child, but she realized that as being the nurturing personality that she is, she took care of everybody else first, and that she always did what Logan, her soon-to-be ex-husband, wanted, and that their marriage and relationship revolved a lot around what Logan wanted, and Logan was ruining her life and where she thought her life was going to be for the rest of her life, by his own actions, because she had been completely sucker punched by Logan, her husband. And I think it was kind of coming along the way for her, is that she didn't really see her self-worth anymore. She was at, you know, almost 40 years old and feeling like, what does she have to give? That she's old, even though, you know, 40 is not old, but, you know, to have a major change in your life. I mean, I'm feeling my age. Like, I'm not real happy. Our older daughter turned 20 the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not 20 anymore, you know? So I understood where she was, you know, and how she was feeling. And all of a sudden having to shift completely, and her life was fine before. She had gotten to a point where that was just status quo with them. It was fine. And then, you know, even going through the divorce, and I mean, it rocked her. And of course, it rocks everybody. It's, you know, I am the child of divorced parents. I am married, and I hope to stay that way. I love my husband. But I also know that marriage takes work, and two people have to work at it for it to work. And when one person is not, it's hard. Coming out of her divorce, I think Billie felt like things were good enough. She had gotten through it. I didn't realize when she meets Sawyer that Sawyer was going to be who he ended up being. And they meet in kind of a funny, not funny, I mean, none of it about what she's going through at that time is funny, but they meet in kind of a funny situation, and he sees her from across the room, and something in the way he sees her sitting there affects him. And it's not like he's like, oh, she's so hot, like I'm gonna go talk to her. It wasn't like that. He saw something with her. I don't want to give it all away. Ugh. How do I say this? Okay, so they meet by chance. He comes into a restaurant bar and sees something in her and realizes that she's uncomfortable and that there's something going on. And he is this younger, it is an age gap. I think there's 9 years or 11 years between them. But he's this young, handsome, charismatic man. And he's like, oh, what is going on with her? In a crowded room full of people, I see her and I can see something's going on with her. And he's drawn to her, and he goes over and he sits down next to her. They have a interesting interaction, and it had my butterflies just going so fast because, and like I said, I didn't even realize he was going to be who he was in that first meeting. It was such a real situation. And that's something that I love so much when authors, I mean, I love a fairy tale, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I read romance novels, but I love when authors write real life love stories. And what happens between them when they first meet could 100% happen to any of us. It wasn't meant to be that first time. And almost a year later, it picks up. And she's going out on a date, and it was like, oh, good for you. And it's like, that's where I thought, oh, okay, that's why I didn't realize Sawyer was who he was going to be. And Billy's going out on a date, and lo and behold, there's Sawyer. And as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, here he is. Oh my gosh, this is him. This is her love story. And it was such an intense and like at times cringy because she's on a date. But oh my God, and then they have this interaction. And when you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's like intimate, even though they're in this room with people, just everyone goes away because he locks eyes and he is engaging her in a certain way. And oh, right there, that's where I started to fall in love with him. And that's where Billy was like, oh crap. That's where she was like, oh my God, here's my handsome stranger. Whoa. Billy has a lot of hang-ups. Billy feels like she has baggage. Billy feels her confidence is way down. But yet she does have the confidence of a almost 40-year-old woman in that she knows what she wants, isn't out for random hookups, and she's, a little bit more serious and conservative person. And I loved watching her growth and how the love of a good man and a good relationship can affect somebody. And actually when it comes, it's both sides, the love of a good woman and how that it can affect a man in a relationship. This duet had all of that in spades. Sawyer, okay, I'm gonna cry every time I talk about him, so just bear with me because he makes me that emotional. KL, oh my God. Sawyer, let's talk about him for a minute. If I even can, because he makes my heart race. He gives me butterflies. He makes me want to cry in the very best way. He is the most self-aware, emotionally mature, emotionally connected, the most present in his life male character I have ever read next to Marcus. That's how and why I fell in love with him so much. And it's interesting because I just was dumbfounded at just reading from his perspectives and the things he said to her and how he made her feel and his own thoughts when we got that in the second book. I wanted to wrap him around me and take him with me in my heart forever. He just, you have to read this book, this series, to understand. And I just did, I thought, how did she do this? How, because it's not like, oh, he's the perfect man. I mean, it's just so much more. Yes, he's my perfect man. Okay, yes, obviously. But like, why he's my perfect man and why I connected with him, I just was dumbfounded. And so what I did was I decided to do a little research, and I only did one thing, and that answered it all for me, is that I went through and I read the acknowledgments in the book and about the author. Well, as it turns out, K.L. Shandwick works in the social care sector in the UK. So I'm American, so I'm going to translate that. I hope I'm right, because it would make perfect sense to me if I was, that she's a social worker or works with people. Is that right? Is she a social worker or somebody that's some sort of therapist or somebody that works with relationships or something like that? That's what I kind of got from her about the author. And that made perfect sense to me, how she knew her way around relationships like this book and writing this book. And that's how she could write her, meaning Billie and Sawyer, and their relationship so well. I was begging Billie to take the chance with Sawyer. You could see from the get-go how amazing he was. And she had a lot of hang-ups, but I was begging her just to go for it. One of my favorite parts was when they met for the second time. And, you know, I always like to read little passages to you guys that I like and that I really connected with. And I just want to mention that I have 5 pages of notes. So if this is a long video, I'm going to do my best to condense it. But if this is a long video, please bear with me. It's so worth it. So this is one of the parts that I really liked, and this is when they're meeting for the second time. And it's Billie's perspective. Before I knew where I was, the song had come to an end. My other life fantasy, where a virile, stunningly handsome man like him would be interested in someone like me, came to a screeching halt when he turned and unpredictably thanked my date Vince for being a good sport and allowing me up there with him. I know that just me reading that to you, maybe you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's great. But this is how so beautifully she crafts every scene that she writes, and how Billie, how I connected with her, because remember I said that it was like a very intimate moment between the two of them, but yet there was a million people around. He's saying to her, and if that isn't intimate between two people, I don't know what is. It was so awesome. And then shortly after, my searching gaze shifted from my date's face to the beautiful man on the stage, and for some strange reason, I wanted to cry. I mean, I almost like cried through this whole book. I was such a sap through the whole thing. Everything that Billie felt, I felt. She's conservative. She's not super confident in her life when they meet. She's embarrassed at times. She has not had her sexual awakening, if I might say, yet. And the love of Sawyer and his patience with her makes all of that come to the surface, and to watch their growth and her growth as a person and his growth as a person through their relationship and in other parts of their lives, obviously, in this book and on their journey, was really amazing. Sawyer knew inherently exactly what she needed when she needed it, because he paid attention to her and he loved her, and he knew that she loved him and that she was just hesitant, and he could feel their amazing chemistry. He could feel that they could have a great love and that she was the love of his life. she was his priority, and everything that came along with her, and that included her child Colby. And they had a cute thing that they used to, well, I mean, it was in hard times that they had to remember as well, but they had this thing where he would say, as long as we're together, we can weather anything. I'm obviously paraphrasing, but you know, he kept establishing their connection and holding on to their connection and reminding her about their connection, and that as long as they had each other and they were a team, that they could take on anything. And I touched on the whole real romance thing before, is that in their journey, it's such a well-rounded story that she touches on so many life things, situations, if you will, like the fact that they have a small age gap, but it is, you know, at a time in life, he's 28, 29, I think she's 39 or 40, you know, 30s are a big decade in our lives. So she's feeling that might be too big of a gap. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, no, that's nothing. So she tackles an age gap in a relationship. She tackles divorce with a child, step parent, step family situations. She tackles self-confidence and trying to find yourself and how you feel and how your feelings towards your partner reflect back on you, and how that affects your relationship, about not feeling good enough in life and being kind of tackled and pushed down and being fine because that's all you expect out of life. And then being so surprised when life opens up and being able to accept that and learn and grow through that. Blending a family and bringing a new person into your child's life and trusting that person and wanting to love that person and hoping that your child loves them too and hoping that they get along and all that that entails. And then on the flip side of being that person, Sawyer was that person, and how he was going to approach his relationship with Colby. He's not his dad, but he's a stepdad, but he's a young boy, so he has time to grow their relationship. I mean, she just touched on so many big life events that we have. She tackled addiction. You know, there's almost nothing she didn't tackle in this book, and it was just written so well, and it just made me connect with the story even more because I myself have experienced so many of these things. Such a well-rounded story. Dear Me is Sawyer's perspective. I almost burst out crying when I realized that we were going to get a whole book from his perspective. It was like I was in heaven. I was in absolute heaven the whole time I read it, even though it is deep. Sawyer is deep. He has thoughts, he has emotions, and he is in touch with them. I love how, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so keep in mind, I'm talking about the second book. I loved how he called her his wife all the time. When he referred to her as we are reading her, he says, my wife. He calls her darling, he calls her Billy, but when he referred to her as his wife, oh my God, I don't know, something about that, and the kind of ownership and pride that when he spoke about her and called her his wife, that shone through with those words. So much of their connection is through their intimacy. Their chemistry, I mean, holy smokes. Kale goes there with their intimacy. Very hot moments in this book, and I'm totally blushing and can't talk about it because holy smokes. Sawyer, in addition to being this super deep, emotionally connected man, he had an amazing sense of humor as well, and I loved those moments where I mean, it was just so typical man to say some of the things that he said. And this is funny. He's talking about one of the times that I burst out laughing is they have moved into Billy's house so as to not uproot Colby. from his, stability of the house he grew up in. And this is what Sawyer says. Because like I just said, their chemistry, I mean, they're like bunnies. They go at it constantly, which is not a bad thing to be reading when you're falling in love with the main character, let me tell you. But let me share this one part with you. One night in Billy's bed with her son in the room opposite was all I needed to know we were moving to live at mine. Trying to get it on with Billy shushing me with every small creak of the bed had been effing frustrating. I mean, isn't that such a typical guy? Like, I could kind of embellish on that, but I'm already blushing, so I don't think I want to. But it was really funny, and I burst out laughing. And, he refers to Colby as like a professional cock blocker, which I thought was really funny as well. But here's the thing, he didn't let it get in his way as far as trying to figure out how they could get around that, as opposed to just being annoyed by it and having it put a wrench in their intimacy. No, he figured out how to get around that. At one point, it was so sweet. Billy says to him, and she says this all the time, they both recognize each other as their soulmates and their true love, and they're in awe of that in each other. So, but it's also very sweet. She says to him at one point, "How come you're so frustratingly amazing?" And he says, "Because I have the perfect woman to be a better man for." I mean, oh my God, Sawyer, yes, yes, yes. Obviously, I would highly recommend The Dare Duet by K.L. Shandwick. I can't say enough about this duet. It just is in my heart and soul in a way that like I said, it was totally unexpected, and I am so in love with it. I already can't wait to go back and read it again. I took so many highlights. I made so many notes. I wanted to make sure that I did them justice when I sat here and shared it with you. I hope I did. I want to be able to share the love that I have for this duet with you guys. So make sure that you head over to my social media, Kat Reads Romance, on Facebook and Instagram, because I will be sharing a little something extra over there for you guys. Let me know if you have read any of KL's other books in the comments below. I need to know what to read next. I want to devour all of her books now. And thanks for sticking till the end. I really appreciate it. I'll see you soon. Bye.